Let's talk about the track view interface. We have the buttons across the top. We have the two sides of the window. We have the hierarchy side and the track side with the timeline across the top. And we have some buttons across the bottom. Let's start by discussing the hierarchy tree. The hierarchy tree is basically a list or outline of objects in the world based on their hierarchy. We have at the top of the hierarchy the world, our 3D scene. We can expand and contract it by clicking on the plus or minus signs. And you can see the relationship of objects based on the indentation. We can expand and contract other objects by clicking on the plus or minus signs, and you can go several levels deep. You can control sounds, global tracks, video post-production, environment, scene materials, that is objects used in your scene or materials used in your scene, and then the material editor materials and all the parameters and maps for those. When you select one of these hierarchy items, you can see the track to the right of it becomes active and white. Under objects, we can see all of the objects in our scene. Right now we only have one object and it's a sphere. And we can expand the object to see its transforms and the object parameters. You can use the hand tool by clicking and dragging in the white space to move up and down, left and right in the hierarchy window. The object parameters can be seen here. Let's look to the right at the track part of our view. The tracks can be scrolled around with the scroll bars, and when you scroll up and down, the hierarchy moves with it because these tracks are associated with these hierarchy items. You'll notice that there are different kinds of information in the track side of the window. We have ranges, and a range represents the total length of time that an object is being animated or transformed. So you can see that I can move my mouse to different parts here. I can move the whole range, and it moves the keys with it. The keys are these circles below. Or I can click on the box at the end and compress or expand the range. Keyframes can be seen as these little circles. When you select them, they're white. So if I click on one of these keyframes, it becomes white. I can click and drag to use a marquee to select more than one keyframe. And then you can get information about different transforms, for example, scale. In the X, Y, and Z direction, I can see this information here. Running along the top of the screen, we have the control buttons. The control buttons enable you to control the aspects of the keys in the track view. Let's start with the filters button. The filters button determines what you see in the track view. And it's a pretty robust little dialog box, as you can see. We have the show area, which tells us what to show. We can show or hide hierarchy, objects, space warps, transforms in different axes, modified objects, base objects, etc., etc. Then we have hide by controller type. So we can hide objects or items in the hierarchy based on this information. And if you hold down the control key, you can multiple select. If you hold down the shift key, you can select in chunks. The show only area lets you show only animated tracks, selected objects, selected tracks, or visible objects in the track view. You can hide by category based on geometry, shapes, lights, cameras, helpers, space warps. And you can change the function curve display for different axes in different transforms. And you can also change the color. You can close this either by clicking on the X or clicking OK. So the filters control what you see in the track view at a given time. The copy controller button lets you copy keys, and then you can use the paste controller to paste them into the next selected track. So I can select a new track, and I can paste those keys into that track over here. If I select one of my transforms, I can actually apply or assign a controller to that transform. So I can select, and then I click on the Assign Controller button, and it brings me up a list of appropriate controllers for rotation, position, and so forth. The next button lets me make a controller unique. So if I have a sphere and it has a controller assigned to it, and I clone it as an instance or a reference, I can make the controller unique by clicking on this button, by selecting first the object that's been cloned and then click on the Make Controller Unique button. If I select a transform, say position, rotation, or scale, I can click on the parameter curve out of range types to bring up this dialog box. And this enables you to control how the animation of a selected track occurs outside of a range that you've defined. So you can use this option to make a defined animation pattern repeat over time. And when you click on this, you get the out-of-range curve types. Since this is a beginner CD, we're not going to actually use this or get into this, but I just want to show you where it is and basically tell you what it does. So you can change the before by clicking on the before button. So I can have this animation cycle before it reaches this parameter. And then after it reaches the range you've defined, you can have it go into this other curve. And again, we're not going to get into this, but I just want to show you where it is. The Add Note Track button lets you add a note to your hierarchy. So say, for example, I've been messing with my position here, and I'm going to have someone else work on it later. I can add a note for them to see so they know why I did what I've done. You can see that a plus sign has appeared under position since it was selected and I added a note track to it, and there it is. I can actually add a note track to transform, and there it is. So I click on the notes track, it highlights it, I scroll over to the Add Key button, and I can add a note and just create a note for that point in time. If you want to add information to the note, select it, right-click on it, and it brings up this little notes area. And you can add 16K of notes. And just close that, and it adds a little note to that track. And you can delete it by selecting it and hitting the delete key. If you have multiple notes selected or created for a track, you can actually delete the entire note track by selecting it and then clicking on the Delete Note Track button. Now this deletes not just the individual notes on that track, but the whole track. So you can select a track and delete it. The Edit Keys button sets the track view to Edit Keys mode. And when you're in this mode, you can edit individual selection sets of keys in the track view. And the buttons to the right of the Lock Selection button on the toolbar change to match this mode. It's sort of contextual. And these buttons will show you by just dragging across here. So all of the buttons to the right here change when I select these different modes. So I select Edit Ranges mode, and the buttons to the right of the lock selection change. So when I select Edit Keys, the buttons to the right change. The Edit Time button sets the track view to time mode, and when you're in this mode, you can add, delete, stretch, or shrink time. And the buttons to the right of the Lock Selection button, again, change to match this mode. When you select the Edit Ranges button, it sets the track view to Edit Ranges mode. And when you're in this mode, you can quickly slide or move groups of keys, and individual keys are not shown. So you're actually just working with the ranges. So you can see I can quickly move the ranges back and forth, and I don't have to deal with any keys. When you're in Edit Keys mode, you see everything. When you click on the Position Ranges button, it sets the track view to Position Ranges mode. And when you're in this mode, it enables you to create special effects by editing ranges independent of their associated keys. And what this means is I can move the range. You can see that keys don't move with it. And I can scale the range, and the keys aren't scaled with it. And when you start to animate, you'll understand why this is important. This is a basic CD, so I just want to show you where all these interface elements are. And we may not actually get to use this, but it's important to know that you can do it. I'm going to switch back to Edit Keys mode. The Function Curves button lets you edit animated keys as curves, and the functions appear as curves or straight lines depending on the function that you choose. So when I click on this, and I click on a position transform or the rotation transform or the scale transform, you can see that your animation is viewed as a curve. And when you click on one of these curves, you can edit the points in the curve by selecting one of these points or multiple points and moving the curves around. And the different colors represent different axes. And when you went to the Filters button, you could see that the RGB represent the X, Y, Z in the function curve display. And we can click this off or click on Edit Keys mode to view in keys and ranges. The Snap Frames toggle forces 3D Studio Max to snap your keys to individual frames when you're editing the keys in a particular track. And if you don't have this on, the keys could end up assigned to a subframe marker that is between frames. And when you actually render it out, it won't look the way you want it. It won't move through time the way you expect it to. The next button is the Lock Selection button. And this locks the current selection of keys so that you can't accidentally select another key when you're trying to edit the selection set. So if I select a bunch of keys here and I lock them, I can't accidentally select one of these other keys. So I can actually move these around. I can turn this off to select others. The buttons along the bottom are the View buttons, and they give you control on how you view your tracks. I can select an object and zoom on it by Zoom Selected Object button. So when I click on this, it'll zoom in on that particular object. When I'm in Function Curve mode, I can click on the Show Selected Key Stats to toggle on the statistics when I select a particular keyframe. It'll tell me the position information numerically. And when I click and drag, that number changes dynamically. The Pan tool works in all of these different methods. When I click on this, I can use the Hand tool to move around up or down, left or right. And I can do this in the hierarchy as well. The Zoom Horizontal Extents zooms to the horizontal extents of the track or tracks. And when I have this selected, it Zoom Horizontal Extents for function curves. And when I have this selected, it's for keys. So I can move over and then click on Zoom Horizontal Extents for keys and zoom in to see where the keys are. I have my different zoom tools. I can zoom with the zoom tool by just dragging left and right. And when I'm in the function curves, in and out, I can zoom horizontally, and I can zoom vertically. I can also zoom for a selected region. So I can just select a region and zoom in on it. Also note that right here I can move to a specific frame by typing in the number. And it moves the key to that frame. Or I can select a key and I can see what frame it's on. So I can select this first key and I can see that it's on frame 0. I can select this key, see it's on frame 39, and I can change it to 45. And it moves to 45. Now that we've finished talking about the interface, we're going to talk about the different track view modes.